but I was certainly funding for, you know, many hundreds of thousands of dollars. So I put over, I put over 7 figures into this business.
Wow.
Yeah, if you guys watch Shark Tank?
Yes.
So Mr. Wonderful says if you're not making business after a year, take that back and shoot it.
Yeah.
So I made no money for 2 years, but I have a different market. And I
Right.
knew that, you know, it takes government a while to buy, you know.
It's a longer sales cycle.
Longer sales cycle, all these things, which is actually works to an advantage once you're established. But
Right.
at the beginning, it's very difficult, but it's hard, you know, to get started in these things. So I think you just have to be realistic going in. But yeah, so we didn't make no money till 2013. 2016, we were profitable,
Okay.
and then, you know, now. hopefully
So what's your
we'll-
exit strategy? Are you hoping to get acquired, or do you want to IPO with your company?
World domination.
World domination, of course. Goes without saying.
Yeah. You know, we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, we have a long, I think, runway. Sarah, who's the lead in our funding, likes to hold companies from anywhere from 3 to 5 years. And, you know, then they either exit out to another PE, or there's a lot of strategics that are also interested in us. And I don't know if any of you all have that as an exit. I think it being 100% acquired by a strategic is a really good play as well. We actually came down to a really tough decision. I mean, I was agonizing over selling the entire business to a strategic or taking a PE investment. And that's like deciding between a steak and a garden salad. They were so different, and I even realized that myself. I'm like, I'm an idiot. How can I not make this decision? But there were 2 really compelling offers. And for me, the thought of the runway that we have ahead of us was just too compelling to me. And I just think that we have a lot of, you know, money ahead of us. But that was my thought process at the time.
I have one more question. Just real quick. So you said you started off in the technical department of Oracle, and then you transferred over to sales.
That's right.
And how long were you doing technical work?
About 7 years.
And what type of, were you like a coder, programmer?
Yeah, I was like a data warehouse builder, SQL coder,
Got it.
all
Okay.
that kind of stuff. I wasn't very good
And
at
did you ever meet Mark Benioff personally?
No, I never did. I met Larry Ellison several times.
Okay.
Yeah, he called me an idiot. He called me an idiot.
Yeah.
Larry Ellison,
I used
that's
to
what I
recruit
meant.
for that company, I know.
There you go. Yeah. No, I never met Benioff, but
Yeah, he
yeah,
used to work
a few
at
other
Oracle,
ones.
probably around the same
Right.
time you were there.
So being in the government area, so are you certified, like maybe any of the certifications for like, on the compliance side? On
I
government?
spend so much money on all of the security stuff, SOC 2, Type 2, we're going through FedRAMP, HIPAA compliance.
DGS.
1075, we spend a fortune on all those things. It's awful, but you know, we got to do it.
I was a compliance specialist, I used to do the certification, that's what I was asking.
There you go. Yeah.
Very familiar.
Yeah, so we have full-time ISO, former Israeli military guy. He's tough. Hired him out of a health plan here in Sacramento, and yeah, we spent a lot of money on it. But that's just ante into the game, right? You know, our company now is processing about 35% of the nation's Medicaid claims. So you can't do that and just be fly by night willy-nilly under security, because that truly is the single thing that just scares me every day when I go to bed. I wake up in the morning and I hope I don't have a problem.
So how are you functioning with the transition of the marketplaces in the 3 states that have?
So the health exchange markets,
Oh,
we don't
sure.
operate in that business at all.
So,
So, and the reason why was there wasn't demand. So typically, so that first thing in my program, it makes sense, like intuitively, it makes sense to be in that business, but there wasn't any demand for it, because the government usually, it takes about 2 or 3 years in a new program for there to be
well,
demand.
they got a 5-year sunset.
And hopefully,
They're gonna see if they're gonna sunset in 5 years.
and we'll see what kind of fraud is
Right,
playing.
okay, that's why I was curious. I'm familiar with the program and the legislation behind it,
Yeah.
and and the distinctions between the markets now.
Yeah.
That's why I was curious when you were talking about the Medicaid, because California's Medi-Cal program was built on the federal component of the Medicaid, and they're still trying to figure out what they're gonna do with the subsidies and how
And where
it
they're gonna put
functions.
them, and Medicaid
Because I could already-
expansion. Yeah, the good news is the
Yeah.
market's so huge, like in California, so we do
Right.
California's Medicaid, there's 14 million Californians on Medicaid. You know, before Medicaid expansion, there were 12, so it's still such a massive market that we won that contract recently. It's, you know, a $10 million a year contract, and the market's so big, that even with some expansion losses, still.
That just goes to show you how much the California market is aging. Because, Medicaid is 60 to 65.
That's Medicare.
Or Huh?
That's Medicaid.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Yeah, so Medicaid is income based.
Income based, yeah.
Yeah.
It's income and disability based, yeah, that's right.
So
Interesting.
you built a system and it's so impressive. But I'm wondering if, given the success and attraction that you currently have you had any interest from foreign governments, for example? And the adjacent question to that is your system something that you can implement in a foreign country? And if yes or no, I don't know, is your company thinking about the future on a global level?
Yes. So is that a French accent?
Oh goodness, yeah. I can hide it. Yes.
I told you, I spent my time in France.
Yeah,
My
that's
mother's
right.
French. So.
Oh, okay, I am French too.
Okay, great. What part?
African. Well, I was born in Versailles and I spent most of my life in
Born in Versailles, in the palace?
So don't tell anyone I'm a princess.
That is a nice house you got. Oh, fantastic. My son's going to study in Aix-en-Provence. And,
Oh, it's
yeah,
nice.
in January. Yeah,
And the
so
food
forward
is
to it.
amazing.
Yeah, so you know my market selection thing?
Mm.
We've applied that to all markets as well. So here's my other philosophy is that, so right now we do business in, Medicaid, SNAP, which is the old food stamp program, tax, unemployment insurance. Those are our 4 key markets. There's 2,300 markets that are very similar to those that we're not working in. Those are going to be the first ones we're always going to look at. Because it's easiest, very profitable for us, we understand it, we sort of see those as along the value chain. Outside of that, there's commercial business, there's federal, and there's international. So we've had, we had a Grupo Oste in Argentina, if there's any South Americans, reached out to us and said, hey, we really like you, we like what you're doing for Southern states, can you do it for us? Our answer was, no, we're just not ready to go there yet. We had the employment agency in the United Kingdom reach out to us because of what we're doing in some of the larger states for unemployment insurance. We're just not ready. So at some point, we might move out, but there's so many different markets. I just think it's back to that shiny ball. I just hate the thought of chasing the market, spending a bunch of time. And you get, you put all this hope into it too, right? Like, oh, I'm so excited about this market, and then when it doesn't work out, it just drags everybody down.
Yeah,
So I'm super careful on that.
Is it me or because it feels to me as if in order for you to do business in a foreign country, you have to start over in terms of the whole research process and of course all the regulations that
Absolutely.
go into it.
Yeah, and of course France is the worst. I remember when Oracle had
It's terrible.
Oracle had 99 HR systems around the world, and they decided to consolidate, but France wouldn't let them, so they had to have 2.
No. And the French demonstrate about every single thing.
Yes,
Demonstration
right.
Yeah.
I think Miriam, I think her name is Miriam Rivera. She's a Kaufman Fellow too, I think, of Ulu Ventures, and she was one of the first she was in-house legal at Google, which is how she earned her wealth. But, I think that was a really strategic move for them in going global, was having someone who knew international law to help them navigate that. And bring them in-house.
I would never dare to think that I'm good enough to go to a market that I don't have experience in.
Yeah.
So if we go into federal, I'm going to get federal people, and I'm going to get the right people, and I'll spend time. If we're going to go international, I'm going to get those people. If we go into the commercial market, I'm going to get commercial people because, there's certain. I said that I was the world's expert in government fraud. I'm not in any of those other ones, and I'm not going to pretend to be because I think you got one chance. Last question. We good?
Last question, then we're going to go to Aaron, and we'll have a brief Q&A.
Aaron's going to tell you everything I just said was wrong right now.
So, John, thank you. My question is about, and I think you really hit on the key point, which is you can't just be a little better. You've got to be, 50%, 100% better. So my question for you is, when you were smaller or more on the starting out side, and you knew you wanted to be that much better than the incumbents, we'll call them, how did you defend against your competitors that had tons of money and tons of people and could, somewhat copy what you were doing because they had this incredible resources that you were trying to be that much better than they were? How did you go about that?
So, it's a great question. First thing I would say is I didn't even think about competition for like the first couple of years that I was in the business. My competition was, can I bring value to my customer or am I not bringing value to my customer? Because the competition for me was a lack of value. I mean, it really was. That's why people wouldn't buy us. That's the way I saw it because I understood the market pretty well. Then, when we started that, and the reason I started this business is because I thought it was really cool and a great opportunity that you could actually rent computing power, like in cloud computing, as opposed to buying all this stuff. I never could have started this company if we had to buy it, and then I had to prove out some of these ideas. We could just rent it, and yeah, it cost me a few $100,000, but that's a big difference than setting up a data center and buying all this hardware and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, I did that. Then, my big premise was that I was gonna start with deals that these bigger companies that you mentioned wouldn't be interested in. So I was gonna fly a little bit under the radar. People didn't care about Iowa workforce development, and they didn't. And when I won Iowa workforce development, nobody cared. So then what I did was I tried to build a pipeline and, you know, build some market mass, so that once I sort of passed over that chasm, and by the time people started paying attention to me, it was too late. And, you know, it was sort of a sprint to be relevant, and but it was very deliberate, and I think we got there. So what happened was, you know, we won California Medicaid, California Unemployment Insurance, New York Medicaid, and a few other of these ones, and some of the big guys went, holy crap, what happened, right? I mean, that's a market that we're interested in now, because, you know, they're getting $30, $40 million contracts, and that's relevant to us. But by the time they woke up, it was too late. And you know, they have all the technology to do what we do, but now we've got all the data, and we've got all the expertise. So I think you mentioned it earlier, Aaron, that there's a really interesting thing, especially in machine learning. I think you're getting into it. So the more data that you get, that goes into the models, right? And the models are tuned using all of this data. And then the models get better, and you get more customers. And then customers give you more data, and that makes your models better. So we're at the point now where we run, you know, 35% of the Medicaid claims in the country. If I go to a state like, you know, Montana, I'd say, why would you go with anybody else? You're learning off of New York, off of California's data. Our models are getting built off of these things. So we're figuring all this out. It's kind of like what McAfee did. Remember, you know, he got started. He just said, hey, send me your bugs. I'm going to fix them. Not bugs, viruses, and, you know, these things. I'm going to fix them. I'm going to send them out to everybody. So that's what we're doing now. And I think that's, again, I mean, it's very hard to replicate that, and once we have those customers and that data, it's very hard to displace us. So that was sort of my, you know, my business thought, and it was a hard sprint, and we had a lot of times where we didn't think we were going to make it, but, you know, maybe we haven't fully made it yet. Don't listen to that since you're invested in us. But we're pretty confident that we're heading in the right direction. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Just last question. So first I want to make a quick side note before my question. So I work for DHCS for implementing
Awesome.
Obamacare.
You work for DHS now? DHCS?
No, actually when the Obamacare was implemented, so I was
Okay.
the program manager mostly implementing all of that. So kind
Did you
of,
work with Karen Johnson? Was she there at the time?
Yeah.
Okay, terrific.
So yeah, kind of a little bit nostalgia. Kind of.
Yeah.
My question is that you said that, you know, for the funding and everything else, the 20-year-old, the 25-year-olds are the most favorite ones.
I think in the Valley that's true. You can argue with me, and maybe you can talk about that when you get up. But I think in the Valley that's true.
Yeah, I feel that when you actually learn a lot more, the chances of you getting successful also becomes more. But then
I think that's true too. I've read studies and tried to justify it, like the number of businesses started by young guys, the number of successful businesses started by young versus more experienced. Very interesting. You need to talk about that.
that's what my question.
I'll cover it real fast.
How at the mental level you handle that when you know that your competition is with those 20 years old whenever you're going for the funding?
Yes.
And so how are you mentally preparing yourself to keep on going back and telling them?
Yeah, I mean, you're 100% right. You know, I would say a couple things. One, you know, for me, it was, again, back to that, what's a good fit for me? So, like, if you look at the portfolio, and, you know, all these guys, for the most part, have their portfolio on their webpage, right? You gotta look for companies that are similar to yours. And when I looked at Sarah, there wasn't anybody doing fraud detection in government. They were doing a lot of things like yours, which were a very specific market, and we're gonna dominate this market with high value. Well, that's what I do. And it made just a lot of sense. So it wasn't like, you know, these interesting little Bay Area things that I don't even understand what they mean. So it was very specific for what we do, and I think that's important. And the other thing I would just say is don't give up. I talked to like 800 of these guys, right? I mean, you just have to keep pitching it, and you got to keep going. And you know, a lot of them didn't like us. A lot of them, we didn't like them, or we didn't fit in their portfolio, whatever it was. I asked a lot of them, like, why do you just like to invest in these younger people? And some of them said, well, you know, we know they'll work their butts off, and, you know, all this energy and all this kind of stuff. But, you know, the other thing is, I think a lot of them had really early stage companies that, you know, didn't have revenues. This is in my case, so they would give up much more equity for a much cheaper price. Whereas I'm like, nah, that ain't happening. You know, this is the deal that I want. And if you don't want to give me this deal, I'm not going to do it. So they would walk away and go away, and then I'd go, and they'd say, you're never going to get that deal, that's stupid. And I'd go to the next one, and then, you know, I stuck to that because I saw the value that we thought we had. So anyway, you know, for me, that's again, I think you got to do your homework on this. Those PEs and the venture capital companies and anybody else that's coming to see you, you're just going to waste your time. It's not bad to practice your pitch a few times, but you're not going to get a deal with someone if you don't fit into their portfolio. So for me, it was really easy. I just said, what government clients are you in? If they said none, I knew I was not going to get a deal with them. Just not going to happen. Okay. Thanks,
Thank
you
you.
all.
You can always tell, you know, the questions just show how needed this information is, so.
Yeah, well, I hope it helps. Hopefully I suffered all the pain for you guys' benefit.
I'm the baby, that's my philosophy too. Let them make all the mistakes.
John, you should know that you are our second youngest CEO, so.
I am? How many you got, 5?
4.
4. Is that true?
Is true.
Man, I feel like a kid whenever I come down.
So I think there's a lot to be said about your point, though. It's a blind spot in the valley. So we call it an opportunity for arbitrage. If you can get
I think you're
the
right.
older experienced fellows, the entrepreneurs that maybe you know, got passed over by a million folks for whatever bias, it just means you get a better deal with the entrepreneur.
Right.
So John's point is spot on, though. If don't waste your time with investors that don't make any sense for you. Anyway, so guys, I'm going to be using the whiteboard, not the PowerPoint, so you might want to pull your seats around this direction. I'm a little frenetic in my style, so I hope you help me with it.
I'm not.